All right, guys. Good morning, everybody. It's evening, sunset. It's a beautiful sunset. If you can see behind me, see over there, sunset. All right. Well, I found a nice place that kind of overlooks the ocean in the evening. I haven't done anything in the evening. It's been mostly in the mornings. So I'm going to read chapter 12, and it is a very short chapter. And the book might be put in as chapter 12 and 13, whatever. I haven't talked to Mr. Placencia about this part, but I will read chapter 12. It's just a short one today. Okay, so let's get started. Chapter 12. One morning in the middle of May, wait a minute, the middle of May, that's like May 15th, let's say. Do you remember when he was torpedoed? I think it was chapter 3. We were torpedoed at 3 o'clock on the morning of April 6th. May. He's been out living on this island for over a month. Over a month they've been surviving with water, fishing. Wow, that's a long time to be lost at sea. Imagine what his parents are feeling. His parents are thinking he's dead. A month and they haven't found him? A month on the ocean? No, people don't see, even in today's world, when we go out and looking for people who are lost, if we don't find them in a week, maybe 2 weeks, they stop searching. That's because they can't find them. They think they're dead. So at this point, middle of May, April to May, so that's over a month and a week he's been gone. One morning in the middle of May, I awakened to hear Timothy taking great breaths. It sounded as though he were fighting for air. I listened a moment and then asked, "Are you all right, Timothy?" He wheezed back, "Fever, malheur." I had to think for a moment to understand what he was talking about. Fever, malaria. I reached over to touch him. His forehead was burning hot. His breath coming in big, harsh sighs. He said, "I got malaria again. Philip, 'twill go away, but fetch some water." When I had fever in Virginia and at Scarloo, my mother had given me aspirin and then put cold cloths on my head, but we had no aspirin on the Cay, of course, and the water was always warm. I poured some water from the keg and gave it to him. He gulped it and then fell back on the mat. For a while, I listened to his heavy breathing and then ripped a piece of cloth from what was left of my shirt, dampened it with water, and placed it on his forehead. He murmured, "That'd be good." But suddenly, he began to shiver, even though the morning air was already warm. I could hear his teeth clacking. I had nothing to cover him with, so I just sat beside him holding the cloth, which was already beginning to dry to his forehead. His breath was like air from a furnace. It must have been around about 10 o'clock when Timothy began to mumble and laugh. It sounded almost as if he were talking in his sleep, but the laughter, little bursts of it between the wheezes, was very high and strange. I couldn't keep the cloth on his head because he was tossing from side to side. I talked to him constantly, but he didn't even seem to know I was there. Once he got up but fell back down to the mat, and I told him to stay very still. For a long time he did, because he began to shiver again. When that ended, the mumbling and high laughter started all over. I don't know if you've ever been so sick where you're really cold one minute and then the next you're burning up and sweating. At about noontime, the mumbling got worse, and I could feel him trying to get to his feet. I clung to his arm, shouting for him to lie down again, but he threw me aside as if I weren't even there. I could hear him crashing down the hill toward the sea, the frightened laughter echoing back. I followed the trail of laughter. Then I heard splashing, and I knew he'd gone into the water. I yelled, "Timothy, Timothy, come back!" Suddenly, it became dead quiet. I screamed his name again and again. There was no answer. I reached the beach and waded out to my knees, then began to move slowly along, trying to keep on a line with the beach. I had gone about 30 steps when I fell over Timothy's body, plunging down in the water. Holding on to him with one hand, I got to my feet again. The upper part of his body was floating, but I knew his feet were dragging on the bottom. I put my face against his mouth. Yes, he was still breathing. I worked myself around to put both hands under his shoulders, but he was too heavy that way. Then I clasped my hands under his chin and began to pull him out. He made strange sounds, but did not try to help me. It took me what seemed like a long time to get Timothy out of the water and back up to the damp sand. He must have weighed 220 or 30 pounds, and I could only move him 2 or 3 inches at a time. I sat beside him for almost an hour in the hot sun, while he rested quietly, his breathing not so harsh now. Then I realized he was shivering again. I knew I could not drag him up the slope to the shelter of the hut, so I tore off branches of sea grape and put them over his body. The grape leaves cut the rays of the sun. I brought water down from the hut, raised his head, and ordered him to drink it. With one hand, I found his lips and then guided the cup to his chin. He seemed to understand and gulped it down. I stayed by him the rest of the long afternoon while he slept. When he awakened, it was early evening and had turned cool again. He was breathing easily now, and I knew the fever had broken because his forehead was no longer hot. Sitting up, he said weakly, "How did I get down here?" I told him he'd run down the hill. "The devil the fever," Timothy sighed. I said, "You went into the water. You scared me, Timothy." "That be true," he said. "My head burned with fire and I put it out." His head burned with fire and he put it out by going into the water. I helped him to his feet and we went up the hill together, Timothy leaning on me for support for the first time. He never really regained his strength. Okay, that's a little foreshadowing there. That's sad to think that he never really regained his full strength from that. And Philip noticed for the very first time that he was offering Timothy support for the very first time. Remember, Timothy has been taking care of Philip this entire time. Philip is blind. Remember, he's doing everything he does, he's doing it while blind. And this is the very first time that he had to take care of Timothy. And he did it. And Timothy feels good about that. Okay, guys, so you take care and bye-bye.